Hi there. This is Rebecca Stark, and I'm just popping in and making another DNF or Do Not Be Afraid video for you. And I I just watched myself. Have you ever do you make videos? Do you watch yourself? I just watched one of my older videos because I wanted to circle back to my story of adopting our son, and I started the story in an earlier video. In fact, I think I'm not. I'd have to double check. I think it's about 6 months ago that I made the first videos, and one of those videos was about just hinting at sharing a little bit of our adoption process. So if you want to go back and check that one out and just see how see how I've progressed in my video making skills. Check out video number 3. Video number 3 is Genesis 21:17, and it's a beautiful. I talk a little bit about the Bible and the context and where this verse comes from and what's going on, and share some of the story that today's verse is from, and then I also start to talk a little bit about our experience, and specifically our experience with infertility. So if you are, or you know someone struggling with infertility, I highly recommend just checking out that verse. So the verse that I'm actually backing up just a little bit. So that video was made off of Genesis 21:17. It's all part of the story of Abraham and Sarah and their road to conception and growing their family and those little bits. So I'm backing up just a little bit. I'm backing up to Genesis 18, and we just talked about this in my Bible study at school or at church, and it just struck me. And what struck me was, isn't that interesting, the way different versions will read the same verse. But I also thought, well, this is maybe a good indication to go back and share a little more of my journey with you. So we're going to look at Genesis 18. Officially, verse 14 is the verse that I'm highlighting, but I just want to back up just a little bit. The Lord said to Sarah, the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old?'" Here's verse 14. "Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you in the spring, and Sarah shall have a son." So context, right? Just a little context. If you go back and you watch video number 3, you'll get the full background. I give you quite a bit, but Abraham and Sarah. Abraham's considered one of the great fathers of the Israel nation, and Abraham is told by God, "You will have many descendants." And at this point, Abraham does have one child. So Sarah, Abraham's wife, gave her husband her servant Hagar and said, "Have a child with Hagar." And they did. They had a child named Ishmael. So that's already happened. And in Genesis 18, Genesis 18 literally starts with the words, "And the Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre." So Abraham's just hanging out, and angels appeared to him. And in this version, it just outright says, "And the Lord appeared to Abraham." And in that conversation, the Lord tells Abraham, "I'm going to come back this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." And Sarah is in the next tent, and she hears that, and she giggles a little bit, right? Because she's an old woman. She is. And she just is thinking to herself, like, how on earth is this going to happen to me? And in response to that little bit of giggling, the Lord asks Abraham, "Is anything too hard for me?" And here's what's interesting when you start to look at the different versions. And I actually have a little footnote next to the word hard. There's a little footnote, and it says, "or wonderful." And that struck me as very interesting. It's like because we were in class and somebody had read whatever version they're reading from. And our Bible class teacher said, "That's interesting, my version." So somebody read and their version said hard. And the Bible teacher said, that's interesting because my version says wonderful. And that's just an interesting, sometimes you can see how words are connected to one another, and you can see, oh, these are close. But hard and wonderful are not close to each other, at least not in my mind. Maybe, if we talk to the Lord says, oh, hard and wonderful, whatever, it's all the same. Is there anything that's just too amazing for me to do? And that's basically what God is asking Abraham in this is there such a thing as too amazing for something for me to do? So in that third video, I did a little teaser, and I said, here's our, we traveled through, we struggled with fertility, and we were unable to conceive a child. And in fact, we tried IVF and that didn't work. And that doctor at that time said, listen, I was willing to try this once. I'm not willing to try it again because just all of the indicators are just too doubtful, just for lack of a better word. It just doesn't, nothing really indicates that we're going to be able to get you to conceive a child. So your options are adoption. And that was just a little upsetting, to say the least. And we sat with it for a while. So that was in 2013, and we just sat with it and just said, we're gonna wait and see. Let's just step away from the whole consideration of being parents at this point. And that's what we did. And so we just went on with our lives. And part of going on with our lives was my mother-in-law really had started struggling with her health. And in 2016, she was in and out of the hospital, and unfortunately, she ended up passing away. So we know that we're at the end. We're in the ICU, and my mother-in-law was basically on life support at that point, and just not faring very well. So we were in the room and saying goodbye to her, and my husband turned to his mom and just said, I'm so very sorry that you never met your grandchild. And there were a couple of other events along the way where we thought maybe, we can encourage my mother-in-law to get better. Maybe if we start an adoption process and we give her something to look forward to, maybe that might encourage her. And it just didn't work out, and that's fine. It is what it is, right? That's part of our life experience. That my mother-in-law passed away, and basically at her deathbed, my husband said, I'm so sorry you never got to meet your grandchild. And there was just something about that just kind of stuck. And we didn't go out the next day and try and find an adoption agency. In fact, it just, the idea just stayed there and sat with us. So my mother-in-law passed away in July of 2016. And in September of 2016, I had to call a tow truck. So just goofy, things about me. So we have this really delightful, lovely bike. I love it. It's called a bucket bike. If you are familiar with the Dutch, it's called a bakfiets. It's a really, really big bicycle, and it kind of looks like it's got a wheelbarrow in the front, in front of your handlebars. So instead of like riding along with your handlebars and you've got this cute little basket in front of you, it's got a huge space in front of it. And the whole thing is 8 feet long. So if I get a flat tire, I have figured out now I can fit the bicycle in my minivan. But at the time I didn't have a minivan. I didn't have any way of transporting this around. So I get a flat tire on this really big bicycle. And the only thing I can do is call AAA. It's and fun fact, AAA will provide bike service. That's part of AAA. They provide service to your vehicles, whether they're motor vehicles or bicycles. So interesting. So I called AAA. I had to go to a training. I was actually getting ready to go to the training, and I'm thinking I'm going to take this bucket bike because it's kind of fun to ride. And the bucket bike has a flat tire, and so I think, okay, no problem. I'll just take another bicycle. I go to my training. I come home. I call AAA. Hey, I need a tow to a bike shop. And they hear bicycle, and they just send out a regular, pickup truck type thing with just a little, bike rack hook on the back. And I was so frustrated because I even tried to explain the first time they called, no, I need a flatbed, because, by the way, this wasn't the first time this had happened. So I needed to get this bike towed to a bike shop, and I needed a flatbed. So the cute little pickup truck comes, and I say no, and it leaves, and I call dispatch again, and I say, can you send a flatbed? Can we try again? And I'm at home. It's Sunday afternoon. There's a football game on the TV. It's not a big deal, right? I'm not in a distressful situation, but I'm getting frustrated. So I finally get a call, and it's this lovely gentleman, and he pulled up, and he had a flatbed, and he said, I'm here, don't worry, we'll get you taken care of. And given that it's later in the afternoon, and this is a really big bike, and I don't want to leave it at the bike shop for any longer than I have to, I ride along with him. So we're riding along, and we're driving by this park in Denver, and I see that they had an event that day where they were doing a Down syndrome, a walk with raising awareness, raising funds for Down syndrome. And I said, oh, isn't that interesting, Down syndrome? And he said, the driver said, oh, yeah, well, my wife and I just adopted our 4th and 5th child from China, and one of them has a very severe form of Down syndrome. And I look at him and I thought, really? You adopted from China? And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, huh. My husband and I have thought about adopting. Tell me more. So we have this ride. I look back at this and I think, who else but God is going to make this happen? Is anything too hard? Is anything too wonderful for God? God made this wonderful connection via a tow truck driver. Would you have expected to talk to a tow truck driver about adoption? I certainly didn't. So that started the domino effect that led to my husband and I adopting our child. So that's just a little more about the story. And I'm ever so grateful. As I said in that first video, it's so hard. It's so hard to look ahead and be expectant and be hopeful and wanting things in your life, but really not knowing if these things are going to come into being. But my experience is, I look back, when we made it all the way through the adoption, and we were home and made it through the fog of like the first few months, however many months of being parents, I can look back on the entire process of adopting our child, and I can see God's hand over every aspect of it. It's just amazing. Who but God would use a tow truck driver as their messenger? And it just worked out wonderfully. As soon as we were introduced to this adoption agency, we talked to them about where to adopt from. Interestingly enough, the placement specialist we met with kind of had this boy, who's our son, in mind. She's met him many times, and she kind of thought of, like, maybe he might be the right one. But his file wasn't ready, and they didn't start getting his file ready until we were ready. It's just amazing. It's amazing the way everything fell into place. And I'm so very grateful. So that's just a little more about our story. And I hope that encourages you. And I hope that the words Genesis 18:14 encourage you. Is anything too hard? Or even better, is anything too wonderful? Is there anything that's too wondrous for God to make happen in your life? I don't know. I only know from my own experience that no, there's nothing that's too wondrous for God to make happen in my life. So I hope that encourages you, gives you a little boost, and just encourages you through any fears that you might be experiencing. Thanks so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.